They're going to look at the manuals. They're going to look at everything, and they're going to see if how is your boiler performing compared to how it should be performing. How is the HVAC system working compared to how it's being used? How is the building being used? And then along with this, part of the law is required training of the staff and proper documentation of all your building systems. So you will have to keep on site all the manuals, any kind of paperwork to do with your building systems. And as a result of this work, the retrocommissioning team will give you a retrocommissioning report. And again, it's very specific in the law what that is, and it's very specific in the law what is required for retrocommissioning. And I forgot to mention the specificity of the audit, but there's a standard that we use called the ASHRAE Level 2 standard. It's a very comprehensive energy audit, and it's a nationwide standard, and New York City is adopting it. That picture, this a gentleman here is installing what's called a thermostatic radiator valve on a radiator. It's a steam radiator, and I've just put this up as a kind of a cool example of solving a problem. If you're in a building where people are complaining about heat, I'm too hot, I'm so hot in the winter, and I can't turn it down, or even if I turn it down, I'm still hot, and I open the window. If you go around New York City and you see a lot of open windows, you know they're too hot in there. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of them might be that it's just not being distributed properly. The heat is not being distributed properly. And the picture on the left is taken with an infrared camera. It's totally red. That means it's completely hot. It's radiating heat from the whole thing. Once you put this valve on, this costs about $100. You put this valve on and you set it to not go above a certain temperature. The next picture is the radiator with the valve on. The blue shows you that that's air. It's not heating up. The red part is heating up. The blue is not. So the person in that apartment is now a lot more comfortable. And that's how you can go around a whole building and sort of balance the system so people are more comfortable. Another way to use infrared cameras is to test whether you're losing heat in other parts of your building. Steam pipes, uninsulated steam pipes, are a notorious way of losing heat, and again, you're just wasting money, you're wasting energy. So the valve on the right, the pictures are exactly the same, just one's infrared and one's not. The pipe valve on the right-hand side has a lot of heat loss, and you can insulate that whole pipe and get a special jacket to fit right over that wheel. This is another example of something that might result from you're doing an energy audit or retrocommissioning. If you live in a mechanically ventilated building, like those typical huge white brick buildings from the 60s where everybody's got central air in their apartment, but you have some people complaining that it's too drafty, or I'm smelling everybody's cooking. It's like one extreme to the other. I don't get enough air, I get too much air. There's a building science reason for that, but I'm not going to go into it all. But you can see by the numbers on the left-hand side, this is just representing a shaft, a ventilation shaft in a building, the north shaft. The numbers, 1 to 18 means floors, so there's 18 floors. The top floors have large numbers. That means there's a lot of air moving around, and those people are probably suffering from drafty apartments. Likewise on the bottom, and for some reason a little bit in the middle. It's uneven. If you install these constant airflow regulators in everybody's vents, in everybody's apartment, wherever they are, you can regulate the flow, and so everybody's even and everybody's a lot more comfortable. The 33 is representing a lower airflow and more even for everybody. Now, once you've done the retrocommissioning and you've done the energy audit, you have two reports. What do you do with them? You staple them together, and now that's called the Energy Efficiency Report, or EER, and that's what the city wants from you. And that's what you have to submit. Now, the next bullet point I made in bold because it's really, really important to remember this one. The audit and retrocommissioning, both, must be performed within 4 years of filing your energy efficiency report. That is so the work is not stale. Now, within 4 years, there's another way to say that. You can't start it before 4 years. If you start the work before you're due, before 4 years before you're due, they won't accept it. So hold that thought, because some of you may be living on blocks where you might have to do it twice and you don't want to do it twice. You might have to do the audit twice. So you don't want to do it twice. So we're going to get into how you avoid that. You have to submit this energy efficiency report every 10 years. And the Department of Buildings is promulgating or issuing the rules over the next year or so. So again, I think I've mentioned this. You have to have a registered design professional do the audit. Now let's talk about early compliance. I'm going to get into this in more detail, but this is a very important concept. And if you go away tonight with nothing else, go away with this discussion on early compliance, because this is important. The Mayor's Office and the Department of Buildings strongly encourage early compliance. And every time they go to make a presentation to the public, wherever, conferences, whatever, they always say, early compliance. We really support early compliance. And you're only allowed to do that once. From January 1st, 2013 to December 31st, 2013, you get one window opportunity to hand in your report. The only way you can do that is if you start now. So let's talk about early compliance for that particular law. The way the law is written, your due date for your report depends on your tax block number. How many of you know what your tax block number is? Yeah, right? Okay. So everybody lives on a block. Every block has a tax block number assigned by the city. You also live on a lot. They've assigned you a lot number. So your building has a tax block number and a lot number. And the way to find this out, there's several ways. And if you want to send me an email, I can help you do this as well. But there's several ways. You can go on the Department of Finance's website, and there's a way to find it there. I forget what all the clicks are, but there's a way to find it there. If you look for the information on your address. If you go to PropertyShark.com, you can feed in your address and for New York City and your zip code, and you can get that data from PropertyShark.com. There's another one called OasisNYC.net. You can get it there. They're all free. Now, buildings on blocks that end in number 3, the last digit is 3, they have to follow early compliance. They have to submit their documents in 2013. So if you live on a block that ends in 3, you should be getting started now. If you live on a block that ends in 4, you should at least be thinking about it now. If you live on a block that ends in 0, 1, or 2, you don't have to submit until 2020, 2021, or 2022. So you may think you were given a pass, but I think you weren't. I think that if you are on a block that ends in 0, 1, or 2, you should be taking advantage of early compliance right now. And the reason is, remember I told you about that 4-year rule, the reason is that if you're due in 2020, you can't start the work until, what's 4 years before 2020? 2016. You can't even start until then. How long does it take to do an audit and a retrocommissioning? 2 years, 1 to 2 years. When is your benchmark number going to go public? How long are you going to be standing out there if you have a low score? From 2013 until? Or 17 or 18, okay? So you're going to be hanging out there, but if you have a low score, you should be concerned about this. If you have a great score, then maybe you don't have to worry. But if you have a low score, and you're one of those, 2021, 2022, or 2020, unless you want to start the work, let's say you want to start the work in 2013, 2014, you're not going to be allowed to submit those documents. So if you're trying to improve your score by making some improvements, you're just going to have to do it all over again when you do have your due date, when the reports are required. So you might end up having to do the work twice. No one wants to do the work twice. So my advice is, if your block's last digit is 0, 1, 2, or 3, you should be heading for early compliance. You should be starting now and getting your documents in 2013. Again, we're going to talk about the benefits of early compliance in a few minutes, but here we go. Okay, so remember I told you the mayor and city council and Department of Buildings is trying to encourage you for to do early compliance. The carrot they've got hanging out there for you is that you get to skip your due date for another 10 years. So if you were due in 2020 and you submit in 2013 early compliance, you get to skip 2020. You don't have to do it again until 2030. So you get to skip your due date. That's the benefit. The other benefit, of course, is what I've been talking about. You get to raise your benchmark score before it's publicly disclosed. And it's, frankly, a simpler process to follow what I call the letter of the law. It's very clear. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. If you follow what the law says and you hand in your documents, it's probably going to be a lot simpler than the rules that the Department of Buildings are going to come up with. They'll admit to that. Okay. And another point that the city raised is that they know that there are not enough qualified energy auditors in the local New York City market to do all these audits. They estimate that once this all gets going, there's going to be 1,700 buildings a year that have to get processed for the green building laws. I estimate a much higher number. If you do 22,000 buildings and divide by the number of years we're being given, that's like 2,000 or 2,500 buildings. So whatever, it's a lot of buildings. Once the qualified New York engineers are booked solid, and if there's a lot of business, their prices might go up. You may have to rely on New Jersey auditors, Connecticut auditors, the tri-state area. So there's certainly qualified people in the tri-state area, but they don't necessarily know everything to know about New York and how to do it right. So that's another reason why the city is encouraging you to do it early. All right, let's talk about the financing options very, very briefly. I usually do a whole presentation on this, but I'm just going to do bullet points on this part of it. So the ways to finance energy efficiency improvements, and what are the improvements? The things that count are windows, doors, insulation. If you do a white roof, you can get a federal tax credit. Green roofs, you get a New York City property tax abatement. There's a variety of benefits for all the things I've listed up here: solar PV, solar thermal, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let's talk about some of the government programs that are available. Let's talk about NYSERDA. Again, that's a New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. They have what's called a multifamily performance program. It was a very attractive program. It gave out quite a bit of money. Mary benefited from that program when it was up and running. It came to a halt last June '09, I think, and it's just starting up now in September 2010. And it's completely changed. So it's still there, but there's fewer dollars, and instead of being based on a whole building energy performance savings, it's more based on items that you buy. Con Ed has another program from 5 to 75 units. And there are some commercial banks, believe it or not, who understand what we're trying to do. They understand energy efficiency improvements and how to finance them. And I can think of 3 banks right off the top who are perfectly willing to do this. I can think of some other ones that don't even know what we're talking about. They just haven't a clue, and it's going to take them a while. Remember I mentioned the cogeneration equipment, over $300,000. You don't necessarily have to lay out $300,000. You can lease it from the vendor that manufactures it, or from an intermediary that deals with them. And so that reduces your cash outflow considerably. And then there's ESCO power purchase agreements. On the I guess you'd call these the first few bullet points money that you get after you've spent the money, as opposed to money you get before you spend the money. So there are a wide variety of federal tax credits, state personal tax credits, New York City property tax abatements, and so on that you can attach to all these kinds of improvements. And then there's utility company rebates. Con Ed has rebates in addition to the multifamily program. And NYSERDA has the multifamily program, but then they have other programs for submetering and solar, so they have separate programs.